Okay, let's review my laptop. A laptop like this needs to be able to switch from being a low power productivity machine to being a full powerhouse of a desktop replacement for studio work and gaming. And yeah, it can do that because this new generation of Intel is much lower power than the previous generation. Look out for them. Some of that efficiency comes from the new ultra low power CPU cores, and some of it comes from the NPU chip as well. I bought this particular device, which is the MSI Prestige 16 AI Studio. What a mouthful. I bought this particular device because it was a cheap entry into this new generation of Intel processors, and they include these NPUs, which honestly, laptops without these NPUs are going to be obsolete within a few years. This also has 32 gigabytes of LP DDR5 RAM, so that's low power DDR5, which is the latest RAM. And when it needs to, it can fire up the 4060 RTX graphics card in here, which is a high-powered graphics card. But my biggest question at this point is, should I actually have waited for the Snapdragon X Elite? Well, I would have been waiting 4 months, so there's one thing there. But the Snapdragon X Elite is designed to bring the efficiency of ARM to Windows. And those Snapdragon X Elite laptops should have even better battery efficiency and good performance too. Currently, I think this is the best standard laptop you can get at this price. It's a high-spec machine, as you've just heard. And right now, the only thing that's comparable in the same price range is the Asus ZenBook. Most of the latest generation of Intel chips are in laptops that don't have dedicated graphics cards. And that's what you need in a studio laptop. This category of studio laptops basically means that it has that processing power, and importantly, it has the graphics processing power that you need to handle the graphics workloads that creative people need. So for example, this video will be edited on this laptop whilst I travel around the country. And it's really the fact that when I'm doing that, whilst I'm traveling on my half-term holidays, I can use video editing, and it's a desktop experience. And creative people need something like this, where when they're traveling around, they can use video editing software like this, or image manipulation software like Photoshop, and have the same performance they get on a big desktop PC. And I can tell you that I am getting that level of performance on the MSI Prestige 16 AI Studio. But here's a bit of advice about buying laptops. Beware of false economies. Learn about the specifications before you buy one, because not all processors which have the same name have the same quality. A Core i7 is not the same as another Core i7, and these have now rebranded to become Core 7s, or rather Core Ultra 7s. But you really find exactly which chip you're getting when you look into the specific name of it. So this one has a Core Ultra 7 155H. And that means that it's Core Ultra 7, so it's the new naming convention. It's this new generation of Intel chips. The 1 means generation 1. The 55 refers to its position in the kind of power there. So the 125 is a lower power, the 175 is a higher power than it. So H stands for high performance graphics. And that is one of the good things about this new generation of Intel Core Ultra, is they do have really good graphics cards built onto them. And this one, of course, has that extra graphics card built into the machine as well. So it's really good for your studio. And one thing I do like about it is the way that it can fire up both of those graphics cards, the one that's built onto the CPU and the external graphics card as well. And I think that there are reasons why they make those naming conventions so seemingly complex. Make sure you're getting the latest processors that you can afford in your price range. Do your research first. And also do take care to get enough RAM for your purposes. That's often overlooked when you're buying a computer these days. The sort of accepted wisdom for a long time has been that you don't need much RAM anymore because the hard disks are so fast. And whilst that is partly true, well, RAM is now a lot faster than it was at those times. And you do need that space on the hard disk for input and output of files if you're doing things like working with video files on Premiere. So do be aware that the RAM is actually one of the biggest bottlenecks that you get. And it's worth spending a little bit more to get those higher specifications. And a few £100 extra now might let you enjoy a laptop for a few extra years. And that, for me, that's easily worth the outlay at this point of buying one. Certainly the thing that was tired about my previous laptop was it only had 8 gigabytes of RAM. So I literally couldn't run Premiere and Photoshop at the same time. It was just impossible to manage those things. And of course, this manages it just fine. It's also one of the criticisms of the Apple M series chips that they aren't as high RAM as they maybe could be. The desktop has 64 gigabytes of RAM, although it's a slower RAM. This has 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, and I don't notice a difference between the two of them. So my advice is to make sure you do enough research before you buy. Consumer websites, they'll lead with these impressive sounding specs, but when you dig into them, you might find that the parts aren't as new as they could be at that price point. So try to buy from more specialist websites and stores where you'll get the current market price for the component. In the UK, my recommendation is scan.com, and you'll find a link to them in the description. And of course, the issue with laptop RAM is it's often soldered, so there's no way to upgrade that after you've bought the laptop. So I did go ahead and install a game on it, a couple of games actually, but I played a little bit of Counter-Strike 2 on here, and I was a little bit disappointed with the kind of quality of the game playback. I was expecting it to get reasonably close to sort of maximum settings, but in reality, anywhere near that was a stuttery experience with low frames per second. But it did do well. It did as well as my desktop PC, but the desktop PC, remember, is 5 years old. I'm a big fan. It's certainly not going to do well sitting on battery saver as it is currently. Although I'm quite interested to see how this does. I've used a 3% in the review so far. Certainly is not going to be working at its highest performance. I'll plug it in. Let's get killed a few times, shall we? So there we are. I'll go back to medium and we'll see how it goes on that. I don't do a lot of game playing, I must admit, so don't laugh. And the other thing is that some people mentioned in the review as well, is that it only has one USB-A port. Now, you'd still really like two, one for a keyboard and one for a mouse at any given time. You have two USB-C, and you do have a full-sized SD card as well. Stop when I go frag. Might be some time. Oh well, that was good. You see, so there's a few drop frames in there, and that's what's causing me to die, obviously. Speakers are quite good for a small machine though, and you know, it is valid for gaming, isn't it? There we are, 2 kills in all that time. It actually hasn't got incredibly hot. You can hear the fans haven't kicked up all that much in that. And that's something about this, is I have found it that you can actually use it in your lap, even when you're running something quite high powered like that. Now the other thing is, as you can see on the screen here, this is showing you what all the different parts of the machine are doing at any given time, and the NPU has hardly done anything, because currently the NPU doesn't do much. But one of the few things that I found actually uses the NPU is the camera app. So if I get up the task manager at the same time, you can see now the NPU is being used constantly to do this blurry background here. So you can't see the mess behind me on the video call. Now, the camera is one of the weaker points, and also the microphone array are one of the weaker points on this, as a demonstration of what an NPU can do, because now if I am on battery power, then that NPU is doing that constant load of making sure that I'm snipped out well and blurring the background. It's doing that sustained load of having to make lots of computations, and it's doing that at a lower power than either the GPU would have to do that or the CPU would have to do that. So an NPU is about managing those resources to ensure that you're using the battery life where it's needed most. Now, yeah, okay, I've shown that for gaming, but the majority of what I will be doing on this laptop will be Office apps, and of course it manages those just fine, and also it will be the Adobe apps, and it actually manages those really, really well. So all of those are really quite snappy to load and to use. And when I take this around and I'm editing it on the go, I will find that it's pretty much as fast as using my desktop PC is. So one thing I will say about this laptop, well, I bought this in January and it's now June, and we're just getting ready for Snapdragon X Elite laptops coming out, and MSI are now selling, like all the big laptop brands, Snapdragon X Elite ones. And at the same time, which is only sort of 5 months later, Intel are announcing the development of their next series of chips. Now, the reason for all this, of course, is that, well, we are now in another new phase of development of processors. We're now in the phase where we're developing processors to do onboard AI, and Intel have to show they're going to keep up with the Snapdragons of the world. We're also in a very interesting phase where Windows on ARM is a very real thing, and we're going to get more powerful ARM chips for Windows to run on. So although this generation, the Meteor Lake 155H chip that I've got here is very good. It is very efficient for an x86 chip. You might find in just a few short years that we aren't really using very many x86 machines, saving that for possibly servers and much larger or desktop PCs maybe. So do I feel a little bit aggrieved that I've bought something that's already going towards being obsolete? No, I don't, because look, that was the best chip available at the time. In any case, this MSI Prestige 16 is not going anywhere. You'll be able to buy this laptop with updated internals year in, year out for the next sort of 6 years, I imagine. And so you can see that the general package you're getting isn't going to change much, but the options that you can spec it up with are going to change. And what we'll see is this arms race now, where all of the chip manufacturers are looking to outcompete each other in tops. And that means trillions of operations per second. This chip has somewhere in the region 10 to 15 tops, whereas the Snapdragon X Elite come with 40 tops. So it is clearly not going to actually compete in terms of the NPU performance with the very best chips in just a short space of time after it was released. But again, it is well worth remembering that when you buy a laptop, you buy based on the current availability. You don't buy based on the future availability. Right now, would I buy this exact with this exact chip? Perhaps not. But 5 months ago, it was the right choice. And this is certainly still the studio book that it promised to be, with an excellent graphics card as well as a fast processor and that efficient MPU core, which still there's not much on here which is actually programmed for that. And this latest brand of Snapdragon X Elite chips are all coming with an extra little button, or rather replacing this Alt key here with a button for Copilot, and they're calling them Copilot Plus PCs. And Windows have stated that you can only call it a Copilot Plus PC if you have above 40 trillion operations per second in your MPU, 40 tops. So I've talked a little bit about how I need a laptop like this to switch between high performance and high efficiency modes, and it definitely does that. One of the reasons it can do that so well is it's got these two graphics cards in it, and it can switch between using the onboard GPU, which is built onto the CPU chip, and a NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4060, which is the high power graphics card. And that has enabled it to have reasonably impressive battery performance, and I'm pleased with it. I'm looking at about 8 hours for light use. So for things like Office apps and light graphics work, like Photoshop, then I'm seeing about 8 hours in total, because it's working with the Intel Arc graphics card, which is built on to that CPU chip. Whereas when it fires up that full GPU when I'm doing video editing, then that drops to about 2.5 hours, which again is not bad for an intensive workload. It's good for a PC, but other comparisons will show you that this is no longer the top of the league battery performance. I think Intel do still have a bit of catching up to do on that. And so those chip improvements are improving battery life, but there's still a way to go. And the other thing that my previous laptop was doing, which was really getting on my nerves, was that it was essentially just cooking my lap when it was doing even low powered tasks. The screen is really good though. It's better than full HD resolution. It's a QHD plus. So it's 2560 across by 1600 up pixels. That's very good in my opinion. It's bright and it's color accurate. I haven't had any issues with using it in bright surroundings, although it doesn't compare to e-ink screens for that purpose. And it's got this great big trackpad, and yeah, I really like that. It's just a great laptop. It's all good things, not much in a unique selling point, but all of the ingredients are really good, and that makes for a good experience. It does also have a headphone port and also an Ethernet port. So you've got, as I said, all of the things that you might want in a laptop. Another question though, it's a straightforward laptop. It's a good quality package. It's a bit of a no-frills experience really, but it's a premium build quality. But in a world of innovative form factors, laptops with screens here or folding ones with floating Bluetooth keyboards, is it still worth buying just a ordinary standard clamshell laptop? And my previous laptop had a touchscreen, and I do find myself occasionally reaching forward to touch the screen at times. I think so, because these folding laptops, for instance, they never come with the level of components that are in here. All of the money goes into that innovative tech. Whereas what you're paying for here is to make sure you get the circuitry right, the components right within the laptop. And if you get the components right, you can add peripheries to your heart's content. Do I miss anything from my previous laptop? Yeah, this is not a touchscreen, and the previous one was, so I do find myself sometimes reaching forward to touch the screen. I didn't use that or the X360 mode enough to make it worthwhile. Certainly in a world where iPads and other tablets are pretty inexpensive, it's not something you need to be able to convert your laptop into a tablet. Also, the keyboard is not as nice as the HP Spectre keyboard was. And even the HP Elite that my wife has is a really nice keyboard. These keys are a little bit kind of squishy and mushy, although you're not going to feel hard done to. It's a solid keyboard and a decent typing experience. And that's what you're getting here. You're getting solid design, but not much more than that. The biggest weakness of this device is what you can get at this price in a desktop PC, or rather what you could buy if you bought a desktop PC and you bought yourself just a cheap Chromebook for on-the-go typing and surfing and web apps. The biggest flaw in the device is that we might just be getting towards the end of the kind of classic laptop. That might be a little bit played out. There's nothing innovative here, it's just a good solid chipset. But yeah, I do go for this even over the e-ink tablets when I want to take something along and get a few productivity tasks done. If all I had to do was type, sure, I might go for the e-ink screen. But being able to go into video editing at the drop of a hat, that is worthwhile for me. Taking with you a good full-sized keyboard, plenty of resolution for lots of different apps at once, on a good sized screen with a desktop operating system, that still beats out the e-ink tablet for multitasking. Great place to write on though. I would recommend this laptop to anyone that needs both power and performance, but I would say that unless you know you need gaming and or graphics performance, I think you'll be fine with the Intel onboard Arc graphics. It's really good, and on here I notice it just plugs away at most things, and the big power-hungry graphics card only needs to kick in when I'm doing video editing. And even then, it would handle those right up to and including many of the hardware-accelerated tasks in Premiere Pro. And I would say that right now, unless you're buying a laptop purely on a budget, and if you plan to replace it in about 2 years, make sure that you're buying one with an NPU unit. Because although there isn't much AI processing going on locally on these devices right now, these softwares will be coming thick and fast in the next few years. Don't forget to check out the latest price for this laptop in the link in the description. The Apple M series chips, they have those NPUs. The new AMD chips will have them as well. And so will the Windows on ARM chips, the Snapdragon X Elite, etc. as well. So that begs the question, do I actually need to get an AMD Windows laptop and a Windows on ARM laptop as well to make those comparisons?